welcome to the deep dive. So you've sent over some really interesting material on procurement management.
Yes, looks like excerpts from procurementmanagement.pdf, some PMP cheat sheet content, and terms from the PMBOK guide, 6th edition.
Exactly. And our goal here is to, cut through it all and pull out the absolute essentials for you.
Right, so you can quickly grasp what really matters when you're acquiring, well, anything for a project, goods, services, the whole lot.
Perfect. So looking at these sources, it seems like procurement really boils down to 3 core processes.
That's right. It's basically plan procurement management first. That's deciding the what, how, and who.
Okay, what, how, who, then?
Then you actually conduct procurement. So you go out, you select your sellers, you award the contracts.
That makes sense. And the last one?
Control procurements. This is managing the contract, checking performance, making sure everyone's compliant, and then finally, closing it all out.
Got it. And understanding these 3, it sounds crucial for pretty much anyone managing projects, not just the procurement specialists.
Absolutely. If your project needs something from outside, you need to understand this framework.
Okay, let's unpack that first one then. Planning the purchase. The procurement management plan keeps coming up. What's the key thing about that?
Well, think of the procurement management plan as your rule book, your strategy document for all procurement activities.
Okay.
It lays out how you're going to manage everything, what contract types you might use, who gets to approve things, how you'll handle vendors. It's about getting everyone on the same page from the start.
So it prevents confusion later on, a kind of roadmap.
Exactly, a roadmap everyone agrees on.
All right. Now, defining what you need, that's the procurement SOW statement of work. Sounds important.
Oh, absolutely critical. The SOW details precisely what you're buying. It's the core description.
And why is getting it right so vital?
Because a vague SOW, well, that's a recipe for disaster. You might get something completely different from what you actually needed. It's probably one of the biggest risk areas, honestly.
Right. If it's not clear, the vendor might deliver something technically correct, but useless for your specific need.
Precisely. I've seen projects go sideways because of a poorly defined SOW.
Yeah.
Leads to rework, cost overruns, you name it. Clarity here is everything.
Okay, clarity in the SOW. Now, how do we find the people to do the work? The bid documents, RFI, RFE, RFQ, can you give us the quick difference?
Sure. Think of it like levels of information gathering. An RFI, request for information, is broad. You're just exploring the market, seeing who's out there, what they can do.
Okay, market research.
Yep. Then an RFP, request for proposal, is when you have a problem or need and you want sellers to propose a solution. How would they tackle it?
So you're looking for ideas, approaches.
Exactly. And an RFQ, request for quotation, is much more specific. You know exactly what you want down to the specs, and you're mainly looking for the best price.
Information, solution, price. Got it.
That's a good way to remember the general flow.
So the bids come in. How do we choose? That's the source selection criteria. Right?
Yeah.
It's not just about the lowest price.
Definitely not. I mean, price is usually a factor, but the source selection criteria are the pre-agreed rules for how you'll evaluate all the proposals.
And what might those include besides cost?
Oh, lots of things. Technical capability, past performance, the specific approach they suggest, maybe their financial stability, understanding of the requirements. You define these up front.
So it's strategic. You're balancing cost against getting a vendor who can actually deliver.
Precisely. You want value, not just a low number.
Okay. And even before we go out to bid, there's this make or buy analysis. Sounds fundamental.
It is. It's that basic question. Should we build this or create this service ourselves internally, or should we buy it from someone else?
And what drives that decision? Just cost?
Cost is part of it, sure, but also capacity. Do we have the people, the time, expertise? Do we know how? Strategic focus. Does doing this ourselves distract from our core business? Risk is also a factor. Sometimes outsourcing transfers certain risks.
So a really strategic decision up front.
Absolutely. It sets the direction for procurement.
All right, so we've planned, we've decided make or buy. Now we're actually making the deal.
Yeah.
This is where agreements and contracts come in.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where risk really gets interesting based on these notes.
Yes, this is critical. The contract type you choose fundamentally determines who shoulders the majority of the financial risk, you, the buyer, or the seller.
And the main categories seem to be fixed price, cost reimbursable, and time and material. Let's start with fixed price.
Okay. Fixed price contracts, like FFP, firm fixed price, mean the price is set up front. It doesn't change unless the scope changes formally.
So the seller bears the risk. If their costs go up, that's their problem.
Largely, yes. They're incentivized to be efficient. It's best when the scope, the SOW, is really well defined and unlikely to change.
Yeah, and there are variations, FPIF and FPIPA.
Right. FPIF is fixed price incentive fee. There's a target cost, target profit, and a sharing formula for savings or overruns up to a ceiling price. It incentivizes the seller to control costs.
Okay, a bonus for doing well. And FPIPA.
FP with economic price adjustment. This allows the price to change based on external economic factors like, significant inflation or commodity price swings. Useful for very long contracts.
Got it. So fixed price puts risk on the seller, good for clear scope. What about the opposite end, cost reimbursable?
Here, the buyer takes on more risk. You agree to pay the seller's actual allowable costs plus a fee.
So if things take longer or cost more than expected?
The buyer pays more. These are used when the scope is uncertain or expected to evolve. Think R&D, for example.
And the variations here relate to the fee part.
Exactly. CPFF is cost plus fixed fee. The fee amount is set, doesn't change with costs. So the seller gets their costs covered plus that fixed profit.
Okay.
CPIF.
Cost plus incentive fee. Similar idea to FPIF, but on the cost reimbursable side. There's an incentive tied to achieving certain metrics, usually related to cost savings, but could be schedule or performance.
And CPF.
Cost plus award fee. The seller gets costs covered plus a potential award fee based on the buyer's subjective assessment of their performance. It's less formulaic than CPIF. Subjective. Needs good criteria.
Definitely needs clear award criteria, even if the final decision is subjective.
Okay, buyer risk, good for uncertain scope. Now, the middle ground. Time and material, or T&M. Risk is shared. How does that work?
With T&M, you pay a fixed rate for labor, say, per hour or per day, plus the actual cost of materials used.
So the rate is fixed, but the total cost isn't.
Exactly. The risk is shared because the total cost depends on how long it takes and how many materials are used. If it takes longer, the buyer pays more, but the seller doesn't necessarily make more profit per hour.
So the buyer needs to manage the work closely.
Absolutely. You often put a not-to-exceed value or time limit on T&M contracts to control the buyer's exposure. It blends features of both fixed price and cost reimbursable.
Okay, that clarifies the main types and the risk shift. Now, you mentioned something specific to FPIF contracts earlier, the point of total assumption, or PTA. That formula looked intense.
Yeah, the formula itself can seem a bit much. PTA equals ceiling price minus target price divided by the buyer's share ratio plus target cost. But the concept is really important. The PTA is the cost level, where the seller's profit effectively starts eroding for every dollar spent over that point.
How so?
Below the PTA, cost overruns are shared based on the agreed ratio, like buyer pays 80%, seller pays 20% of the overrun. But once the total cost hit the PTA, the seller essentially absorbs 100% of every additional dollar of cost overrun until the ceiling price is reached.
So beyond the PTA, the seller is basically working on a firm fixed price basis regarding any further overruns up to the ceiling.
Precisely. Their profit margin shrinks rapidly after the PTA. Understanding where that point is helps both sides understand the incentive structure and the real risk involved. It's a key negotiation point in FPIF contracts.
That makes sense. It's the point where the incentive really bites for the seller. Okay, so we've chosen a contract type. Now, executing to overseeing, this involves conduct procurements and control procurements.
Right. Conduct procurements is the actual process of getting the proposals or bids, selecting the seller using your criteria, and awarding the contract. It's putting the plan into action.
Getting the deal signed.
Yep. And control procurements is everything after signing. It's managing that relationship, monitoring the seller's performance against the SOW and contract terms.
Making sure you get what you paid for.
Exactly. And managing changes, processing payments, ensuring compliance, and eventually formally closing out the contract when the work is done and accepted.
And where does the project manager fit into all this? They might not be signing the contract, but...
Oh, the PM is absolutely crucial. They're usually deeply involved in defining the needs, so contributing heavily to the SOW.
Because they know the project requirements best.
Right. They'll often assist the procurement or legal team in developing the contract details, help evaluate proposals from a technical standpoint.
And then, after the contract is signed,
that's often where the PM takes the lead in managing the relationship with the vendor day-to-day, monitoring their progress, verifying deliverables, managing changes through the formal change control process, resolving issues.
So even without signing authority, they're managing the execution and the outcome.
Absolutely. The PM is responsible for making sure the procured item or service actually integrates with the project and helps achieve the project's objectives.
Okay. And the risks we need to watch out for in procurement. Seems like we've hit on many already.
We have. The big ones are definitely that poorly defined SOW we talked about.
Leading to the wrong thing being delivered.
Right.
Yeah.
Vendor underperformance, they don't deliver on time or the quality isn't there. Cost overruns, especially with CR or T&M contracts if not managed well.
What else?
Legal or compliance issues can crop up.
Yeah.
And just a fundamental misalignment between the contract and what the project actually needs as it evolves.
Which highlights the need for good control and change management.
Definitely. Proactive management is key.
Now, things are always changing. How are agile and hybrid project approaches affecting procurement? The old ways don't always fit, right?
That's a really important point. Agile's focus on flexibility, iteration, and responding to change definitely pushes procurement to be more adaptable.
So how does that work in practice? You can't always have a perfectly defined SOW up front in Agile.
Exactly. So you might see things like rolling wave planning applied to procurement. Maybe you only define the detailed scope for the next sprint or phase with the vendor.
And the contracts need to support that.
Yes, you need contract structures that allow for incremental funding, evolving scope. This is why T&M and certain cost reimbursable types are often seen as more agile friendly.
Because they allow for that scope flexibility.
Right. And the SOW itself might be structured differently, perhaps focusing more on capabilities or outcomes for an increment rather than detailing every single task upfront.
What about the relationship with the vendor in Agile?
It tends to be much more collaborative. Vendors are often treated more like integrated team members. Think regular demos, frequent feedback loops, joint planning sessions. It's less transactional, more partnership-oriented.
So collaboration and flexibility are key for Agile procurement.
Absolutely. Adapting procurement practices is essential for Agile success.
Okay, this has been a great overview. Let's try to boil it down to the absolute key takeaways for someone listening. What should they really lock in?
All right. First, the fundamental risk allocation. Fixed price generally puts cost risk on the seller. Cost reimbursable puts it mostly on the buyer. T&M shares it, know which is which.
Got it. Risk allocation. What else?
Second, that point of total assumption, the PTA in FPIF contracts. Remember, it's the point where the seller really starts feeling the pain of cost overruns.
PTA for incentive contracts.
Yeah.
Third,
The project manager's role. It's vital. They bridge the project needs and the procurement execution, even if they don't sign the final paper.
PM is central. Fourth,
Pay attention to the core documents. Procurement plan, the strategy, SOW, the what, and things like the RFP, the how you ask. Get these right.
plan, SOW, RFP, crucial docs. And finally,
Remember agile procurement? It's about being flexible, iterative, and importantly, collaborative with your vendors.
flexible, iterative, collaborative for Agile. Great summary.
Thanks.
So really, understanding procurement management isn't just about process steps. It's about being strategic in how you get resources
While actively managing risk.
and building relationships that work, especially when things are uncertain or changing fast.
You got it. It's about smart decisions supporting project goals.
Okay, so here's a final thought for you, the listener, to chew on. Considering these different contract types and how they allocate risk, what factors do you think are the most critical when deciding how to procure something for a project? Especially maybe when you're dealing with a lot of unknowns or trying something really innovative.
Good question. Something to reflect on based on your own context and experience.
Exactly. Think about how these frameworks apply to your world. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.